Hello, everybody. I am Sylvain Rochon, and this is another episode in the series where I'm writing my second book called Engineering Paradise, subtitle yet to be determined. We'll see about that later on. And in this episode, I'll start to talk about the executive. A lot of it, I understand, is about governance, but that's really important to really spend a lot of time on um, because we can do things so much better than what we're doing now because of technology. One of the main points that I keep hearing, because I'm in Canada and we work a lot with the States, and Canada has a similar lingo, but it's very strong in the States because there's this notion of for the people, by the people, that kind of a phrase. And I think that's really important. And it's something that is doable in a very direct way. So I'm spending a whole section on governance inside this book, 1 out of 3, because of that importance. That we need to empower ourselves as individuals because we can. It's as simple as that. If we're all connected, because we're all connected through the internet, and we have the capacity to, with AI and automation, to free ourselves from the need to work to live, which is something we've covered before. Then we can, choose how we're going to work. And we don't need intermediaries with motivations and platforms and parties and any of that those things. We can govern ourselves as an organism would through an intelligent communication system. And there's a lot of really interesting interactions and results out of this exercise that would be potentially extremely beneficial for us moving into the future. So this is about the ministries and the executive. And I've mentioned before that in my view, it would be better to separate everything in ministries that are, in effect, the executive. Now, traditionally in governments, you have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary that are separate branches. And in this case, they're still separate, but the way I see it, it's just better that we consider them all as executive, even though there is a ministry that is legislature, because you'd still need to have rules of conduct and different regulations that are applied. And the judiciary, which still needs to be unbiased to take care of everybody, to make sure everybody's safe and secure, and where equality would predominate. So they are part of the executive, but they still exist. You still need those aspects, right? Now, one of the first elements that I haven't covered yet is the need for some of the ministries, at least actually many of them, to have a low, well, you have the national ministry, which has a leader that we discussed, like how he's ordered in. But you also need more regional, like either by state or provincial or by county, and in smaller bits. And even potentially, in some cases, having ministries that are very local, right? And like in the case of the infrastructure ministry, well, you need, at different levels, you need different ministries to look at problems and construction or different issues that needs to be resolved at different levels of scale, right? But one of the main features of these these ministries or subsets of top-level ministries that take care of smaller regions is because we know from history that people tend to congregate under certain ideologies, languages, ethnicities, history, tradition, and so on and so forth. And these individuals do want to do things slightly differently. And if they're not allowed to do that, they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel accepted, and that causes unrest, that causes frustration, stress. So we do want these different levels of ministries to be applied to do and have some level of independence in regions. And we'll go ministry by ministry, so I'll be able to illustrate how in which ministry actually it makes sense to actually do that, and how it actually can apply. Now, as far as functions, like when you have different levels like this, well, you still need to have some unbiased way to have staff in there. So what I propose, we do have a national leader, which is great, and this leader can, of course, choose his own staff, but I would recommend using AI also for that. Like at least for top level positions, you don't want to have any favoritism. You want to avoid in governance any kind of bias, right? So you don't want, you want the AI to select candidates that are also top level in each ministry, and you present them to the leader, and then he can make a selection. He or she, sorry, this individual can make a selection for different positions. Now, these could be runners-up in the national or other types of elections. As far as the regional ministry branches, if you will, then the AI can propose, and there's even could be a vote for leaders of different a state level, for example, ministry. And then you can have the same process that happens on state level or even at a local level. And the system can be adapted to all of that stuff. The AI takes care of all the calls and it can present all the candidates, the information so people can vote. It can select based on geographies, GPS, where people live, all the data. It can select who can vote for who at what time, all that stuff. So it's not a complicated process to do it once the system is in fact in place and running properly. But it's really important to have these individuals in place. Now, as far as further staff beyond top positions, then I think just a general hiring process would be sufficient and acceptable to most people. But it's really the top level individuals where you can hit some corruption or biases, and you want the AI to be unbiased and just select who's the best experts, and there can be some level of selection or voting happening there. So that's great. So let's aim for that. That's what I'm going to write down. All right. Now, what we also want to avoid is a bloated governments, because like I described before, government tends to be less efficient than private sector. Is the advantage of being unbiased if you set it up right, but it will be inefficient because there's no direct inner motivation for the people to actually work in there. They are put in the position of responsibility on behalf of people to handle certain things in unbiased ways. So less efficient, naturally. So you want that to be as small as possible. That's why we want, contrary to what we currently have in governance today, where a lot of governments are trying to improve employment as much as possible, in particular inside government, in many cases, because that's a good way to pump up employment numbers. We don't have that concern. We don't want people to work for a living. In particular in governance, where people are essentially volunteering their time in some way, even though they would be compensated, they are chosen. They don't put themselves up as candidates, right? You want to minimize the amount of actual people there. So you want to roboticize, automate, have AI as much as possible. And also the role of government and governance in our ideal situation is not, absolutely not, to do things for the people unless it's absolutely impossible. Or you'd have like an extremely biased results that would break the equality and the basic needs distribution that we're talking about. So we're going to go ministry by ministry, kind of defining this case by case. But we do want as a priority the government to make sure that basic needs are met, and to guide private sector's motivation through regulation, through programs, through motivations, to drive, because the private sector are the ones that will be able to get good prices, be efficient, create competition for the consumer, because the client or the people that are benefiting, that have to benefit from anything that governments do, is the people. They are the government. So you want to engage them as much as possible, which is why it's really important to have this online system of communication that is set up and accessible to all. which means internet access has to be available to everybody and free in our ideal society. It has to be provisioned by the government. Doesn't mean that private sector can't provide it. The government needs to make sure there is a basic level of internet. If people want to have higher speed or better service, private sector can cover those things, right? Or there's some kind of arrangement between governance and the private sector to handle different regions. There's all sorts of models that are available that would be possible. But bottom line is, you want to make sure as a governing authority where everybody needs to be engaged in the governance of the country. They all need to be connected. So we'd have this online system that allows the people to suggest, even if it's something related to like a pothole in the street, they can go online like in a very simple way and say, hey, this coordinate near where I am, take a picture, whatever, put it up online, there's a pothole, this needs to be fixed. And the system, because it's intelligent, it knows the person's GPS, where the person lives. You know, if the individual is an expert or just a citizen, so they, you know, it kind of weighs the type of comment and feedback based on the person's knowledge of what he's talking about. That helps the system sort like what's really a problem, what is speculation, and how to agglomerate the information in a certain way for the workers to know exactly where to go and what to do and what problems are prioritized, things like that. So anyway, you do all that, and we know where the problem is, and it's dispatched to the right. In this case, would be a local ministry and infrastructure in the case of potholes, and then you have a certain number of people reporting it in that particular local community, and then the same morning you have all these images, and it's prioritized as, you know, as very important because there's nothing else going on that's really important. And you probably, for something like a pothole, you probably already have a budget for resources, and you have robots and AI automatically kind of going there and fixing it even before anybody in the ministry wakes up. Okay, this is all. There's a lot of stuff that can be done. It's all automated, all behind the scenes. You don't need somebody pushing files all over the place. That is inefficient. That's why you use robotics and AI as much as possible, and the people feed into the system on things that are like foreign policy, national level, or you know, amendments to the Constitution, things that are major like that. Well, individuals can still express themselves, and it goes into the analysis system of the AI, and these are brought up to, in the case of constitutional law, for example, would be put into the legislative or the lawmaking ministry, the way I call it here, and they would see if this is something, and a discussion ensures on the system, if it's something that Canadians or Americans or whoever really cares about. And then they can start working on that because of the people's requests. And again, this can be prioritized based on the data provided and how many people suggest things. And, you know, individuals collectively, because they could feedback a little bit similar to social media on each other inside the system. They could obviously have quite a bit of work done as far as gathering information. In particular, again, you have these experts that know more based on the system, their past and their careers and their jobs, that have a higher weighted value as far as their information and what they're saying. But everybody can get a say and comment and share. That's really important. So people get to actively participate in what is important by feeding into the information. Now, this all goes to the appropriate ministry, local, national. You know, it's all sorted automatically, and then it's treated by the leadership that actually was like, okay, well, here's my report for today from the AI system, from the population. This is the analysis of what's going on. Prioritize that, and they can press certain things that are not fully automated under an economic budget into action, and take a decision, and they feed that back into the system in many cases. Because in a lot of cases, according to some of the rules, they'll, you know, the population will need to weigh in. to see, like in the case of a new law, as an example, push it back out. Like, okay, this is, like, we heard you, this is what we recommend. You have a week to feed back into this. And then again, it's weighted, like people that have more expertise in law, in this case, can weigh in a little bit with more points, if you will, or with more weight. But everybody can feed back in and say the comments, and maybe it's a little bit different in California. There's some nuances that people from there, the system will detect. They don't like this one law, but in the East Coast, they like it. Then people can get the feedback. So, okay, well, so why is this? And I entertain the conversation and adjust accordingly so that it applies to everybody. Or maybe the decision would be, well, we have to relegate that to the provinces or the states because there is very strong division between the different states. A system like this can very easily analyze all that, and then it's fairly clear to make a decision on it. So it allows the people to be in governance themselves. That's really important. And as a result, like, I don't know if you know this, but I took two countries that I know, which is Canada and the States, right? If you look at the statistics for federal voting turnout, you know, how many people actually go out and vote when it's time to vote for a federal election, which is roughly every 4 years. And in Canada, the stats are approximately between 60 and 70%, like roughly 65 within the last 10 years. In the US, it's less. It's almost 10% less. It's less than 60%. It's about 50, 57, something like that. Well, the level of engagement is based on how people care about the leadership and governance. But also there's a lot of promotions and pressure, and there's a lot of that going on in both of those countries. But if on a regular basis the people are solicited and engaged and they care because they see that government is directly, they are the governance system. They just have people in place to execute. That's why I call it the executive ministries. Then when it's time to vote, because the system can be extremely simple, they are more knowledgeable about the different cases. They are more engaged, so they want to apply their vote to choose leaders according to expertise and so on. And that's really positive for social discussions, because I mean you got a population that is more knowledgeable. And because we have, universal unconditional basic income in place, again, I'll talk further about this in this third section, that people also are not very stressed, so they have time and the mind space to be in that involvement as well. So we can take decisions together and we can decide what can be just let the AI take care of all these issues that come up. So you don't have to have all these decision process. That can be a decision that can be made by people and can be reversed. And you have certain decisions that will always, at least for the next 20 years, want to have somebody at the head, deciding, making a decision, making a law, and it needs to be discussed every time by the population. This is all things that an online system can organize as long as we set it up. We have the technology today to do this. It's not complicated. And so I'm just asking you guys, why not do it? Let's do it. All right, so that's going to be it for this video, but I'm going to be recording now because I cheat every couple of weeks. I make 2 videos, but I'm publishing it every week. So the next video, I'm going to be wearing the same exact clothing. And I will be talking about the first ministry specifically, which is the lawmaking ministry. So see you in a week.